Good evening, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to Hilaal Live. My name is Faraz Patel. We'd like to thank you, the viewer, for staying with us. I also like to thank my colleague Lukman Shadrack for taking you through that first part of the show. Now, one of the big stories, of course, through yesterday was that the ANC has cut ties with former President Jacob Zuma for defecting to a breakaway party that claims to be the true heir to the party's armed struggle against apartheid, a bold move that could pose a potential threat to the party's dominance in KwaZulu-Natal. ANC Secretary General Fikile Ambulula said there was no objection from any NEC member when it came to the decision to suspend Zuma. Now, joining us to discuss this and whether it will have a ripple effect in terms of the province of KwaZulu-Natal, I'd like to welcome political analyst Professor Dirk Kotze. Professor, good day. Thank you so much for joining us here on Hilaal Live.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much.
It's an absolute pleasure. Prof, KwaZulu-Natal, we always speak about the importance of this province, especially for the ANC entering into democracy. Is there a threat right now that, given Zuma's overwhelming influence within that part of South Africa, that the ANC may be potentially losing support ahead of this year's elections?
Yes, I think it's very likely that that will happen. It's a trend that already started about 10 years ago. We've seen in 2019 that the ANC lost about 10% of their provincial support. A lot of it went to the EFF. We saw also in 2021 in the local government election that they lost substantial support, including in eThekwini, the metropolitan part of Durban, where they don't have a majority anymore of more than 50%, and therefore must govern in a coalition. And we've seen that in general, the ANC in the province as a whole is below the 50%. So if one projects both the 2019 election results as well as the 21 election results, then it's almost inevitable that the ANC will lose this time again. And given the fact of the new dynamics that you've referred to of President Zuma and the MK party, that might contribute even more to that. So I think that is certainly the predicament of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal at the moment.
Prof, obviously there's an IEC decision that Zuma may not stand in any supposed leadership role within the MK party given his past transgressions. Now, many would believe that it's immediate that the MK may have a complete and overwhelming influence within KwaZulu-Natal as a party. But surely there could be other parties coming into the frame that could knock the ANC out. For example, the likes of an IFP. We, of course, have the DA with Chris Pappas, who's very charismatic in the way he's projecting himself to be a premier. So it seems that it doesn't necessarily well be the MK party that could be out and out challenging the ANC in the KwaZulu-Natal. There are other parties that could really come into the frame and knock the ANC completely out from that province.
Yeah, it will be difficult to make a prediction now already, but I think if we look at the trends of the last number of years, then the main parties will remain the IFP and the DA, and not the MK party or any other small party that will emerge, or the merger with, for example, Ace Magusule's ACT party. They will be more on the margins. The main parties, I think, are the established parties. That means the ANC, the DA, and the IFP. In some cases, also the NFP, the splinter group from the IFP. But I think those parties will be the main role players in this coming provincial election. The MK party might have some support in some pockets, especially in the areas where President Zuma are quite popular. But at this stage, the fact that the ANC distanced itself now so openly from President Zuma means that people now will have to make a choice between him and the ANC. And a few months ago, or just a few weeks ago, actually, they were not supposed to, or they didn't have to make this choice. And I think if it is about the choice, which party still provides them with the best opportunities for most people in the province, then the ANC will definitely have an advantage over the MK party. But given that, the MK party will certainly be able to fragment some of the components of the DAs, of the ANCs, especially the fringes in some areas, some specific pockets of it. And that will will undermine the ANC and will definitely pull them below the 50% mark in this election, the provincial election.
Prof, it was an overwhelming majority within the NEC that voted to have former President Zuma suspended from the party. I ask this question in that, of course, he had his RET faction within the ruling party, and he was loved and adored by so many within the NEC. How did it come to this, where he was completely alienated from a party that he served for quite some time?
Well, I think the straightforward answer is that he abandoned the ANC effectively. What he did is, in terms of ANC perspective, almost a form of treason in their own terms. It's a way of turning your back on the ANC, campaigning against the ANC, irrespective of whether he says he didn't resign from the ANC, that he wants to transform the ANC to the ANC of the past, the ANC that he led, and the ANC maybe even in exile, and the values of the ANC of those times. And that he's very critical of the leadership of President Ramaphosa and saying that he deviated from the values and the directions and the history of the ANC. Despite all of that, the point is that the ANC over time developed to the point where it is now. It isn't anymore the ANC of exile or the ANC of Tambo or the ANC of the early 1990s even. And ANC members are for very specific reasons supporting the ANC. And it is not just an emotional attachment. It is an attachment which has very strong political motivations. And therefore, what President Zuma has done is going straight against it. And I think that is why there's such strong feelings about what he has done, and the fact that there are very few people actually within the ANC tries to take his side or protect him.
Prof, was the writing always on the wall for Zuma, given, of course, what happened in 2018 when he was officially removed from his position as the President of the Republic of South Africa? He then went ahead and made public utterances against President Ramaphosa. And most telling, of course, his key allies, the likes of the Karl Niehausers and the Ace Magashules, were kicked out of the ANC. That was enough, wasn't it, to suggest that he truly was, frozen out from this party?
Yes, I think the fact that he was willingly and very much in public able to establish a faction within the ANC which was very critical of the ANC leadership, and some call it the radical economic transformation. That undermined the unity, the function, the coherence of the ANC. And that contributed a lot to the fracturing of the ANC that we saw now over time. So when his term as president, national president, and ANC president came to an end, it very often is part of political dynamics that the person has influence while he or she is in that very position. But once they abandon that position, once they retire, they lose that influence because they cannot anymore take decisions with some very specific consequences for the people around them. They cannot be a type of distributor of goods, and in the sense of positions, of opportunities, economic opportunities. And that is what people are looking for nowadays when they want to be involved with politics. So in that sense, it undermined his influence and his status within the ANC. compare that with President Mbeki, who retired. The same with Kgalema Motlanthe. They've retired. They are still involved in ANC activities, but they don't try to anymore to shape the direction of the ANC or to become an influencer in the ANC and try to mobilize support within the ANC. And I think this is what President Zuma tried to do, because some would say it's because he wants to protect himself against the court cases, that he wants to protect his legacy because the state capture notion is so overwhelmingly strong, and that undermines whatever he did for the ANC during his time as president. So these were motivations, and then obviously this incarceration. These are all contributing factors to the point where President Zuma maintains that he's a political victim, that there's a political strategy against him, and he wants to protect himself against that. But these are all working now against him because he took this final decision to effectively abandon the ANC. And I think there's no return for him. Over and above the fact that he is a person of a high age already, there's simply no turnaround for him in political terms. So I predict, in a sense, that this is actually the end of the political career of President Zuma.
Prof. Kotze, thank you so much for joining us here on Hilaal Live. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
That's our political analyst, Professor Dirk Kotze. Of course, breaking down Jacob Zuma. The ANC, they are no more. Who would have thought, after decades of serving the party, all things sometimes need to come to an end. After the break, I'll have more for you on Hilaal Live. Do stay tuned.